Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Pascal Robert, on another episode of This is Revolution. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you like what we're doing, please hit the like and subscribe. It's a passive gesture that goes a long way. If you're a returning listener, glad to have you back. Also, we have something new for patrons of the show, a newly weekly blog called The Crisis Papers, different articles on a wide variety of topics by the TIR crew. I think y'all will dig it. Jason worked hard on the layout. It's free for all patrons that are in the teenage art anarchist tier and above. The first issue is up, and we should have another next week. Now let me bring in my co-host, M. Toussaint.
Hello. Good to see you today.
Good to see you too. You looking forward to the show?
How are things in Florida? Did you get the alligators out of your yard?
There are no alligators in my yard. There have never been any, and there will never be any. Thank you very much.
Milton didn't blow any into your yard?
No, Milton didn't blow any into my yard. Thank you very much.
But otherwise, you guys are good. The Robert clan is good.
Yes, the Robert clan is very, very good. Looking forward to this show. Are you looking forward to this show?
I am. Always good when Paul's on.
Very good. Well, welcome to another episode of This is Revolution podcast, where we dive into the intersection of class, race, and social justice. Today, we're focusing on an important but often overlooked figure in the civil rights movement, Ernest Calloway. Before civil rights became deeply intertwined with identity politics, the movement was rooted in economic justice, with many of its leaders also playing significant roles in labor organizing. Calloway exemplified this approach, working tirelessly at both civil rights and advocate and a union leader. Our guest today, Paul Prescod, recently wrote a compelling article for Jacobin magazine about Calloway's life and legacy. Prescod argues that Calloway's vision of linking labor struggles with the fight for civil rights offers a critical model for today's movements. We will explore Calloway's contributions to both the labor movement and civil rights struggle, as well as why his legacy remains significant in the current political climate. Please welcome friend of the show, Paul Prescod.
Clap, 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 clap.
Hey! I missed the clap sound.
Yeah,
no problem. As Calloway said himself, we are living in an era when pressure of big business are so dominant in Washington, they deny the democratic process, but the power of organized labor can make the democratic process a reality. The intersection of labor and civil rights is essential in understanding Calloway's unique position in history and why his approach remains relevant in organizing efforts today. Paul, how are you doing, my brother?
I'm great. It's always good to be here.
I enjoyed your article thoroughly, so let's just get to the questions. I thought it was, how did you find out about Ernest Calloway, first of all?
Yeah, he's, I almost wouldn't even say he's overlooked. He's never looked at. So I was reading a book a few years ago. It's a good book people should read, by Clarence Lang, who is now actually, I think, the Dean of Liberal Arts at Penn State. But he wrote a book called Grassroots at the Gateway about Black politics in St. Louis from the 30s to the 70s. And this name kind of kept coming up, this Black Teamster organizer, Ernest Calloway, and all these different things he did. And so that kind of piqued my interest. There's another book that I looked into called Fighting for Total Person Unionism, which is kind of a dual biography of Calloway and Harold Gibbons, also a Teamster. So, he just was a fascinating figure. And then the more I dug, it was kind of a joy to research because he's an amazing writer. It's kind of like that's kind of like Calloway when you read his writings. Kind of just got more and more into him the more I learned about him.
Excellent. In your article, you highlight Calloway's belief in linking labor struggles with civil rights. How did his union work, particularly with Teamsters, shape his approach to civil rights activism?
Yeah, it was really everything for him. I guess I could answer that by going further back in his life. Unionism, was with him from the beginning. So he came from a coal mining town, first in West Virginia, but then early in life moved to Kentucky. And, something I don't think a lot of people know is that the United Mine Workers of America, early on, before the formation of the CIO, when you just had the AFL, the Mine Workers Union actually stood out as one of the few large unions that was, fairly interracial. And they organized black miners in the South and in Appalachia. They, were deliberate about having black officers, black union organizers. So they were relatively egalitarian, especially compared to other unions at that time. So Calloway's father was a miner and was an activist in the United Mine Workers. So he kind of had that his whole life. And, when the CIO came about in the mid and late 30s, Calloway was kind of starting to come of age politically. He had been active during the Great Depression and the unemployed movement, and was kind of gradually making connections in the labor movement. And then it was in the 40s that he got a job with the what they used to call the Red Caps, which was a basically black baggage handlers on the rail lines. He got involved with that union. So for him, that was always a key part of civil rights, and he viewed especially the emergence of the CIO a big opportunity for black workers and black civil rights. He thought that black union people really should kind of exercise more leadership in the civil rights movement. So instead of it being the more elite or middle class elements that at the time had kind of dominated groups like the NAACP, he saw when the union movement emerged that these should be the people at the forefront. I could go into, do you want me to go into now, all this stuff with the Teamsters or
we get into it with the questions a little bit later on. So
okay. So yeah, I'll stop there. But, I think that early, his journey through the 30s, and part of why I wanted to write this piece too, I think his life is a very perfect summary of, what I just term, I wish there was a better way to say it, but the Labor New Deal Civil Rights Coalition, which really emerges in the mid 30s. That's when Calloway starts getting active, and it starts to die in the early 70s, which is when Calloway kind of retires from the union work. So his life kind of hits all those moments. He, there's an interesting transformation that happens with civil rights organizations like the Urban League and the NAACP in the 30s, where they just couldn't ignore the Great Depression. They couldn't ignore that class was becoming central. So they gradually start to change. They gradually start to become more open to unions. The Urban League formed industrial worker councils. They tried to do education about unions in black communities. So Calloway was a part of that. He was part of these early black unions like the Red Caps. So he was kind of there the whole way. And then, when he gets to St. Louis, they formed this really powerful coalition between basically the Teamsters and NAACP that, is a very good example of like what a labor and civil rights coalition could look like.
Calloway argued that the key to black empowerment was not only fighting for civil rights, but also organizing workers and building political power through unions. Can you expand on this?
Yeah, and something he remarks on a lot, especially in the 60s, and especially as you're seeing the urban riots happen, especially as you're seeing a bigger divide open up between the black middle class and the black working class. And then he was kind of an early, I think, observer of, naming a black underclass that was developing. And even sometimes, if there was any criticism, he kind of, at times in his writing, indulged in some underclass ideology, nothing as extreme as like what would come later from people. But he was kind of one of the first observers of this. And he would say, frankly, that the civil rights movement is largely missing black people. Aims of it are largely for middle class elements. So he saw, the unions as being crucial for, making the civil rights movement real for working class black people. And he kind of could see what was coming, that if this didn't happen, you would have the urban black poor just continuing to fall behind everyone else. You would have this black middle class form that, would eventually be able to leave cities and leave other people behind. So, that was just kind of always a big part of his outlook. And, I think crucially, the unions, not just being good in themselves, and obviously not just being good for workers, whether you're black or white, being in that union, but what he really did to a genius level in St. Louis was he used the union as an institutional vehicle for other political ends. So the good thing about something like a union is like it's an already organized structure, and it's a base, and it's a constituency you already have, and they have shop stewards, so they developed the shop stewards network that wouldn't just focus on the shop floor, but a shop stewards network for local political issues or local neighborhood issues. Kind of doing what a ward system could do, if it was functioning in a good way, but he used the union to do that. I mean, he basically used his union to turn the NAACP into more of a real mass organization that did real organizing. So this idea of like the union provides an institution to take on other issues and take on civil rights issues. And yes, you have groups like the NAACP, you have groups like the Urban League, but the kind of organizational practice that you have in a union can really be applied. And, I have a quote in the article from a woman who worked in the NAACP with him, and she said, we had never seen the group run this efficiently and this competently, and this is the skills he learned from his union. And something kind of interesting about that point, to go off topic a little bit, is you actually see this trend happening other areas in the 40s and 50s and 60s, where working class black union activists pretty much enter NAACP and take it over in local areas and turn it into more of a working class organization, taking on more working class issues. It happened in Chicago with mostly packing house workers going into that NAACP. In Detroit, it was a lot of black auto workers going into that NAACP. So this was kind of happening in many cities at the time. And I think in St. Louis, they took it to the highest level with what they did with the Teamsters.
Toussaint, you want to continue?
Sure. I think it's interesting that he ended up working for the NAACP while working for the union. That's kind of amazing. I don't know if you can still hear me. Oh, he's frozen. This is not good. You got through the first question pretty well.
You got frozen with a cup in hand.
I know. And he's just drinking. I'm not sure. So what'd you think of the is he coming back? Paul? Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Paul? Ooh, I'm not sure if Paul can hear us. So Pascal, what'd you think of the article?
I liked the article very much because it was introducing someone I was not familiar to. They talked about how he did something successfully that I had not seen often, which was intersect the working class elements of the black poor and working class into the middle class, petite bourgeois civil rights establishment that normally basically tried to work on racial democracy instead of social democracy.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting too. It's so different from the way these organizations, especially the NAACP, runs now.
Well, now, it's basically the black political class working for its fatback and biscuits, so we know how that goes.
I mean, I wonder if there's a path back to, working with unions instead of the fatback and biscuits.
Paul, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Paul? It's like he's blinking really slowly now. I wonder if there's a way I can kick him out so he can come back in. I'm not sure. Yeah, it was a radically different view of the NAACP for me.
Definitely. It's like we rarely hear the history of them trying to appeal to the sensibilities of workers and labor, as opposed to try to work on racial democracy. So social democracy was something that they actually tried after the Depression.
Right. Which they were kind of forced to address those issues because of the Depression, right?
Exactly.
So do we need another Depression?
I don't think we want another Depression, but definitely need to have a politics going back to materialism. Did we get him back?
It looks like his camera's on. He's melting, someone said. What do you think of this comment, Pascal? Haven't you heard unions are racist?
That's often a stereotype a lot of black folk have about unions. Like, oh, unions are racist. But I was like, black people as a constituency have the largest labor participation rate in the unions of any other demographic in the United States. So the fact that people believe that black people are racist, unions are racist, they clearly don't know what black workers are in America.
In his article, he actually points out how at the time that black people and white people were both in the union, black people benefited significantly more.
From the CIO, yeah, exactly. He talked about it.
It's pretty amazing. Let's see if we can get him back. Can you hear us, Paul? There he is. Can you hear us, though? Can you talk to us? Let me get this next comment on the screen. If Fatback and biscuits gentrified, we won't be able to afford to eat in the next depression.
That's funny.
Neriank says, I'm depressed enough. No thanks.
Yeah.
And Tony Red says, depression forced everyone to focus on class. You couldn't not.
That's true.
It's very, very true. I mean, I think the Depression is a very interesting era in American history because it was so pervasive. It touched everyone.
25 to 30% rates of unemployment. You want to go back there?
That's incredible. It's amazing the way people found ways to survive. I came across the recipe for something called a water pie.
What the heck?
Would you like to try that?
No, not really.
Someone in the chat says some of them absolutely are racist. However, it is not typical U.S. white supremacist racism. It's more like ethnic whites versus other ethnic whites versus black people. Interesting.
Racism is not something you escape anywhere. I mean, the fact that unions are racist, is that going to stop you from participating in something that's ultimately to your economic benefits?
I mean, that's a very good point. Yes, it was essentially water with crust. And the person who made it made a video and said that it actually tasted really good. It looked like a pie with like clear gelatin in the middle. Very, very weird. Oh, water pie worse than mayonnaise sandwich. Tony Red says burning crops to heat homes because it didn't pay to sell them. Capitalism appeared a total failure.
Yep.
I mean, that's a good time to attack capitalism and get more people onto the left.
When the crisis of it is fully exposed. And that's actually what happened. More people started to understand the dangers of capitalism and moved to the left.
Right. Which also happened after 2008.
That's true.
It was a good time to get more people onto the left. And our friend Paul was a part of that with his work on podcasts. Can you hear us, Paul? Hear you. Can you hear us, Paul? Can you say something? Oh, this is sad. This was such an awesome. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, I'm surprised.
You're breaking up. There we go.
Frozen to me, but if you can hear me, that's an improvement.
We can hear you.
All right.
We can hear you. You're breaking up.
I just got.
Oh, he's trying again. Let's see. Yeah, he dropped out. He's trying again. So yeah, about the article, it's interesting how we followed the life of this man, Ernest Calloway, who made it through the Depression. I mean, there's very little in the article about his actual suffering in the Depression. He wasn't like a child. He was working, and it was a good time to be working with unions and that sort of thing.
No doubt, absolutely. It was. The guy had spent an amazing life. He saw the ups and downs of every aspect of the civil rights movement and the long march to economic justice within black communities and union movements as well. I mean, it was. I'm sure he dealt with a lot with Jim Crow segregation and all that. But the thing is, though, his activism was spurned in the fire of those difficulties that really brought forth some amazing work.
It did. I think organizing is a very interesting line of work. And you read about these organizers that are supposed to be so talented, and it's like, what are they doing that is making things work so incredibly well? Apparently he made these unions sing.
Yeah.
He had some very high praise in this article from different people at the time.
He was a very, very talented organizer. It's just sad that his name isn't mentioned more. And I think that what it demonstrates is how much we're so focused on the racial democracy elements of the civil rights movement and how far we're removed from political economy in terms of its involvement with the condition of the lives of black people. Like, we're still in a time where we can't talk about how American conditions of race are rooted in political economy instead of just talking about the white man. It's a really tragic reality. And he demonstrates how that needs to stop.
Do you think that's sort of an American issue overall, not just an issue with black people?
I mean, I think that what has happened is that with the fall of the radical left of the 60s and 70s, the ability to look at political economy as the fulcrum of the suffering of people of color around the world has lost sway. And everyone is kind of stuck in a position where they're looking to various forms of racial democracy or old school, racial reductionist solutions for the problems without considering the simple fact that capitalism is the root of these problems in the first place.
Well, I guess part of the issue is that you're not allowed to talk about capitalism on TV.
I don't know if it's not. Well, I think that's part of the problem is that when you have a capitalist fueled media, they're going to be reluctant to have people challenging capitalism. I think that's part of the reason why Bernie Sanders got such a raw deal when he was running in 2020.
He wasn't even challenging it like that, man. He wasn't even that hardcore.
No, he wasn't. It was too hardcore for the mainstream media in America, though.
Right. Very mild, tepid reforms are too much for this system. Too much for the protectors of this system. Ernest Calloway actually goes to England. That's something that I enjoyed about this guy in this article. He travels. He goes to Harlem at what point? I believe it's during the Harlem Renaissance, because that's where it was popping.
That's true.
And then he goes to England later on.
That's true. He studies in England as well.
Right. He studies in England at the time when Labour is ascendant. They're
Yep.
super powerful, the Labour Party, and the NHS was being developed and passed.
Correct. He had perfect timing in terms of when he starts participating in these movements.
And Paul is contacting me. Oh, he says he's sorry. For some reason, the streaming service has issues with his computer and internet.
Yeah, Restream.
It sucks. Yeah, Restream is we use Restream to live stream. It's a funny system. It's a funny system. But can you imagine being in England, excuse me, when the NHS is being created?
It's pretty exciting.
And then coming back to the United States, all full of pep, only to be shot down.
Not literally, though.
Let's see. I'm going to have a look at the questions, see where we were. Let's see. In the context of his work with the Teamsters, Calloway helped bridge the racial divide within the labor movement. What lessons can modern labor movements learn from Calloway's ability to unite Black and white workers in the struggle for better wages and conditions?
Well,
What do you think we can learn from his story?
I think we can learn the importance of using political economy to create cross-racial alliances to challenge capital and the power of big business. For sure.
All throughout the article, it keeps coming up, this issue of integration. It mentions that the CIO was integrated.
Right.
In your knowledge of history, do you know much about the CIO and Black people?
CIO was the first major union to integrate and to use Black labor and use it as an organizing tool. It's definitely one of the most powerful unions in terms of trying to eliminate the barriers of racial Jim Crow, in terms of incorporating Black labor as part of the fight for unionization and labor rights.
It's pretty amazing how much of this history is lost for in favor of the I Have a Dream speech.
Exactly.
Do you want to read the fourth question?
Sure. Calloway's life seems to reflect a broader historical trend where Black leaders in the labor movement were crucial in pushing for broader social change. Why do you think figures like Calloway haven't received as much attention as other civil rights leaders? That's a good question. And I think that lies in terms of the nature of his work, because he was challenging capital and big business in a way in which it was rooted in political economy and not simply talking about racism.
I think at the I Have a Dream speech, it's important to know the people who are literally standing behind Martin Luther King Jr. and how they got there. That's where you'll find a guy like A. Philip Randolph also.
Yep.
And
it was the march for jobs and freedom.
Right. And Bayard Rustin is back there also. It's a shame we don't know as much about people like Ernest Calloway. I think because his background is so union heavy, and that has so fallen out of favor.
Well, I think there's a fundamental attempt to try to distance Black people from their union history, because we don't want them realizing that they have a participation in the union movement and the labor movement in this country.
Right. I think that's true as well. It's important to keep solidarity a secret. One of the most striking aspects of the Calloway article is Calloway's recognition that organized labor could be a powerful force for democracy. In today's context, with unions in decline and neoliberal policies reigning supreme, how can labor movements regain this democratic influence?
That's a good question, because I think one of the things that's an obstacle to labor strength is the aristocracy of the labor movements, which is the leadership of labor, is being tied to the corporate elements of the Democratic Party without being able to take it to the more radical elements of challenging the big bosses, instead of being ready to just take concessions that allow them to really just kind of sit back without taking a more militant stance because they're worried about their numbers.
Mm, that's definitely an issue. I think I think the knee jerk sort of response that unions are racist is something that needs to be dealt with.
Oh, for sure.
Because even if there is racism in your union, which there probably is, because as you said, it's everywhere, you still have so much to gain from being in a union.
Yep.
In the article, they were talking about how Black people and white people joined the union, the same union, but Black people gained so much more than the white people
Absolutely.
because it's beneficial to be in the union. Do you want to read the next question?
Sure. Can you talk about Calloway's political strategy with the labor movement? What role do you see for Black workers in leading labor reforms, and how does this reflect on the current labor organizing within Black communities? I think one of the most significant parts of Calloway's strategy is that he tried to incorporate the working class into the leadership of the traditional civil rights movements without letting the class biases of the petit bourgeois elements in the Black community become an obstacle to their participation.
Hmm. What role did the Black workers in leading labor reforms? How does this reflect the current labor organizing within Black communities? Do you know a lot of Black people in unions?
My mother was a long-term member of 1199. She retired as a union. Unions helped pay my schooling education.
I think my dad was in 1199 too. SEIU.
Yep.
Your mom's a nurse, right?
She's a retired nurse. Yep.
All the Haitian moms are nurses.
Not all, but a lot of them.
A lot of them. Don't feel bad. All the Filipino moms are nurses too.
It's a competition, man. The Filipinos and the
Yes, it is. But I don't know how many young people I know that are in unions. I'm in a union. Not terribly active in it, but I go to the meetings that I'm required to go to and vote when I'm required to vote. But I don't know a lot of young people in unions.
What union you in?
Newspaper guild workers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For working for Jacobin?
For working where I work.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I don't know a lot of young people. Most of my working life, I did not work anywhere with the union. I mean, I might have stayed at any of those other places. I worked in the fashion industry for several years, and none of those places had unions. Fashion industry is a very unregulated industry.
Yeah, unregulated in the sense that they don't allow labor to coalesce its power.
Not at all. I mean, you see what they do overseas. They also act badly in the States as well.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So let's see. Reflect current labor organizing. So we're on number 7. Lastly, how do you see Calloway's legacy influencing today's political climate, especially given the rise of labor organizing efforts like those of the Amazon workers and the resurgence of interest in socialist politics?
I think this is a time where people like Calloway should be more considered in terms of, I think that it should have been more considered. Not should be, should have been. I think is where actually moving away from the high point of that era of interest in socialism and labor and moving into a whole direction now, since both flanks of capital, the right flank and the left flank, are moving towards a kind of more conservative direction vis-a-vis Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
I think that's why articles like this are so important. It's important to learn about people like Ernest Calloway. It definitely brings the learning to life, seeing it through a biography of a person who actually lived.
No doubt.
So, what would you like to chat about?
I thought the article was pretty good. I mean, we have some time left, but I really appreciated Paul introducing this figure into our lives because he just demonstrates everything that's right about labor organizing and fusing in the importance of working with the civil rights movement and not having a blind side to race, but also realizing the importance of political economy and causing racial harm.
I mean, I think that's very true. I think this article does a good job of bringing this person into our lives, reviving this historical figure for the modern era, which definitely has relevance today. I think what comes across while you're reading it, and it's very easy to read, while you're reading it, is how much passion Paul has for
Ernest Calloway.
Ernest
And
Calloway.
union work in general.
Right.
I think Paul is one of those people who realizes that unionized labor is one of the best ways to assure a quality of life for the average American worker.
I think that's true. He's very, very passionate about the unions.
So,
about those alligators in your yard?
You asked. There's no alligators in my yard.
What about the lizards? What do you call them?
Zondolites.
Zondolites. We have a comment here from Timothy Connerson. More work is done through tech. How do podcasters and food delivery people form a union?
That's a great question. Podcasters, a podcasters union. That's what I'm talking about.
Would you join a podcasters union?
If there were some benefits, sure.
If there was some benefits. Nice. Let's see. I mean, unlike any other commodity, media is completely unregulated without so much as a Surgeon General's warning to warn consumers what is and what is not news.
Yeah, I wonder if that's tied to the First Amendment freedoms, free speech element. They try to pretend that media is protected by. Yet its media is censored all the time for violations of other elements of the federal law.
What's the year they had that Gary convention you always talk about?
1972.
There we go. By then, where was labor in the Black experience?
I think that labor was still kind of ascendant for Black workers. Mm-hmm. I think that what had happened, though, is that because of the move to things like Black nationalism and race reductionist policy, interest in labor as an ultimate means of ensuring a quality of life for Blacks had not exactly gained its sway. And something Paul talks about this in his article, how the change in direction of the political agenda of Black politics kind of made focusing on social democracy kind of difficult because racial democracy or race reductionist politics was taking sway in the Black community.
He talks about how when Calloway was working at the NAACP, there was some kind of initiative, and the middle-class Black people in the NAACP tried to undermine the efforts of the working class people in the union.
Correct. One of my favorite parts of the article.
I mean, do you think that happened often back then?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. The whole notion of this kind of like racial kinship politics between working class blacks and black elites has always worked to the disadvantage of working class blacks to the inurement of betterment to the black elites. I mean, it's a perfect example of how the black political class works today.
Mm-hmm.
They broker the politics of working class black people to there ensure their benefits from the patronage they get from the Democratic Party.
And they're pretty powerful because they have money.
They get money for basically working in the interests of the Main Street corporate forces that support the Democrats.
It's a shame. I was really disappointed at that part of the article. I mean, I guess we know what was going to happen. I know what I was born into, but
I wasn't surprised. I was glad to hear it. I was glad Paul highlighted that in the article.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always willing to talk about the way in which class division amongst black people provides an obstacle to the agenda of working class blacks to the benefit of the black elites who tend to be more interested in their own self-aggrandizement.
That's basically what the NAACP is now, isn't it?
Fatback and biscuits, baby.
Fatback and biscuits. When I was in college, I remember a friend of mine joined the NAACP local chapter where she was, and she was like, "Go on the NAACP website." I was like, "Okay." I checked it out. Looked like old and stale. But when you go to the NAACP awards website, it's got all this flash and effects, and it just looks new and spiffy and up to date. Kind of shows you where their priorities were.
Absolutely.
She said she met Julian Bond.
Really? While he was still alive?
Yeah, she said you could tell that he used to be a good-looking guy in his youth, and he acted that way.
Yeah, he was. I've met Julian Bond when I was an undergrad. He came to speak at my undergrad. He was considered to be of the more radical wing of the end of the civil rights establishment. Not so much the Black Power elements, but more the radical element of the NAACP. Like he would at least talk about poor people.
Right. I like Julian Bond. I would see him on the different shows, Like It Is, and all the other ones.
You remember Like It Is? Oh, I thought you were too young to remember that stuff.
I used to love Like It Is. I used to have my Black Power Sundays. I would listen to like the community radio shows on BLS and stuff, and then
what?
And then I would watch Gil Noble on Like It Is.
What?
Yeah, it's a big part of my my education.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I thought you were all at Fashion Institute drawing.
That's true. Remember Gil Noble had that African statue behind him?
Wow, I'm surprised you're actually old enough to remember that stuff.
I had nothing to do.
I watched Gil Noble religiously when I was coming up.
That's cool. Tony Red says, Pascal, just get Obama out there to chastise some folks some more. That's the answer.
Not. It's not the answer.
It's not the answer.
Obama does not have the bona fides to chastise anyone.
Obama's not a union guy.
No, he's not. He's a union buster.
Isn't Biden considered to be like the most union-friendly president?
Yeah. Even though he walked on the the railroad strike?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Biden did some interesting things. He tried to seem like he was more progressive. I mean, you say like, "Oh, he was the most progressive Democratic president we've had since Lyndon Johnson."
look.
Julian Ball also spoke at my undergrad. Really, Sid?
Nice.
Did he shake your hand?
Wow. Look at this.
Gil Noble was amazing. I spoke to him many times. We're in an organization together. Wow, that's incredible. Gil Noble was a phenomenal guy. That was the time when Black Affairs shows of business were serious. Julian Bond was one of the first targets of the post-CRM Fatback and Biscuits primary in Georgia with John Lewis, 1986. That's correct, Dr. Quall.
Is that right?
John Lewis primaried him.
Oh, that's like Adam Clayton Powell Jr. getting primaried by Charles Rangel.
John Rangel, that's true. Well, John Lewis had his civil rights bona fides as well. He was head of SNCC at one point.
And he decided to ride that out for the entire rest of his life.
Yeah, he took a lot of victory laps.
A lot of them.
Bruce Dixon, my former editor at Black Agenda Reported, hated John Lewis.
Is that right?
Hated him.
I hated him too.
Jill, you didn't like John Lewis?
I don't know. He talked about getting spit on, and it's like he makes it sound like he got spit on many times over many years. It's like, how many times did you get spit on, bro?
I hate when he said, I saw Hillary in the civil rights movement. I didn't see Bernie Sanders. Like,
Unbelievable.
Hillary Clinton was a Goldwater girl. Bernie Sanders was marching.
Unbelievable.
He was an early signatory to the DLC that took the Democratic Party into the conservative direction under Clinton.
Of course.
He was a total DLC tool.
Dave L. says, quote unquote, most pro-union president is a low bar. That's fact. Obama got a lot of blowback for his last stunt. I'm sure Michelle will sit him down. Are you frozen, Pascal? Or are you reading? Oh, no. That is insane. Come on, Pascal.
How long what? Obama got a lot of blowback for his last stunt. I'm sure Michelle will sit him down.
I thought you were gone for a minute there.
I had a little breakup. My Wi-Fi kind of disconnected for a second.
I thought the alligators got you.
It's no alligators, man. You with the alligators. Put it down with the alligators.
What did you call them? The lizards?
The Zondolites.
Zondolites. There we go.
That's what they call them in Creole.
The Zondolites got you. Let's see. Can I change?
John Lewis made a living from getting beat on the bridge. His constituents are some of the poorest in the third in the world.
Do you see this comment?
Which one?
Wait, I'm trying to get this up. Oh, yeah.
Bill Clinton talked about how John Lewis better than Kwame Ture at his funeral. I know, I saw that. That pissed me off. Bill Clinton is such a freaking plantation boss. I hate that SOB.
And he raised the prices in Harlem. He gentrified Harlem. Do you see the comment on screen?
Hillary is the one who spit on him. Ha ha ha! Dr. Smurfo.
That was a good one.
Bruce Dixon wrote great articles about John Lewis. Yes, he did.
Oh no. Are you frozen again? Did the Zondolites get you? Is that what they were called? Yeah, they got him. We're chewing on the wires.
I'm back.
Zondolites? That's what they're called?
Zondolites.
Yes, they're chewing on your wires. Read the comment on the screen.
Where can I read more about the history of unions working in tandem with civil rights? Well, check out the books in Paul's article.
Mm-hmm. True. That's a very good article. And he mentions a lot of books in the article too. I'm going to put the link into the chat again. The link is also in the description. Oh, wow. Look at this comment. I can't believe this. Do you see it on the screen?
Y'all are some John Lewis haters. Nicole Alexander Floyd.
That is wild. That's wild. That is the last thing I expected to see tonight. Tell us who Nicole Alexander Floyd is. In case
Nicole
they missed the
Alexander
episode.
Floyd is a professor of political science at Rutgers University. She was a guest on my Mouse show.
There we go.
last year.
There we go.
Call us John Lewis haters. Oh, come on. We're not liberals here at This Is Revolution podcast.
I think that's so funny. Yeah, we are children of Black Agenda Report.
Hello. Now, if he were Clinton, y'all can talk about him with abandon.
She's right. We don't like him either.
No, we don't.
We don't like him either. What did Strom used to call him? Saxophone Reagan?
Saxophone Reagan? Really?
Yes. He said they were all like versions of Reagan after Reagan. So Bill Clinton is Saxophone Reagan.
Well, it's sad that we lost Paul Prescod earlier, man. This could have been interesting to see him wax rhapsodic about Ernest Calloway.
That's right. Paul is super knowledgeable and very passionate about everything he writes about in the Jacobin.
Yeah, the Jacobin. You know about the Jacobin.
He has several articles in it.
Yes, he does have several articles in the Jacobin.
This question.
What's the topic tonight? We're talking about Ernest Calloway, union organizer and civil rights organizer du jour.
I wonder if she's ever heard of him.
She's a well-rounded scholar of political science and feminist issues. Mm-hmm. I'm sure she may have heard of him. She's a well-read scholar.
He seems like the type of person that you know of in passing. You've seen the name before, you know, if you're really into this stuff. Interesting.
Fitting because everyone now are versions of Obama, who himself is Black Reagan. That's funny. Also true.
Also true. We have a lot of versions of Obama. We are stuck with this character for a very long time.
Hopefully not. I think hopefully people... I am a union woman. Smile. Yes, you are.
Nicole Alexander Floyd is a union woman. You guys should go back and watch the Mau Mau Hour with Nicole Alexander Floyd.
Yes, she did a great job.
Yeah, it was a good one.
The Jacobin YouTubers where I first saw MT and Jason. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Claw.
Yeah, I used to be their mod in their chat.
Yeah, you got a long history with the Jacobins.
That was like, back when Michael Brooks was still around, and
that was the heyday of the new left, the new post Bernie left in America, where we had podcasters galore and
podcasters.
Well, he openly claimed Reagan's legacy, saying, His would be a transformational presidency like Ron's. That's
I guess
true.
she's talking about Obama.
She's talking about Obama. Obama, as my friends call him.
Obama.
Keir Starmer is Margaret Thatcher in drag.
Yeah, what do you think about Keir Starmer?
Oh, he's a neoliberal centrist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bring back Corbyn.
Corbyn got a raw deal.
Corbyn got a very raw deal. It was sad to see what happened to both him and Bernie.
Yeah, they basically got taken down because the capitalist institution is not prepared for anyone who's left of center.
Not at all. I wonder very much about what is going to happen with young leftists in the UK and in the United States. Oh boy. Did we lose it? Oh, okay. There you go.
That's a rough question to ask. Adolf Reed called Obama out as a neoliberal when he was still a senator. Even before that.
Right.
When he was a state legislature. When he was a state legislature.
Let's see.
I was watching FD Signifier over the weekend, and he said he watches this show and mentioned Pascal. Oh, did he really? Oh, shout out to FD Signifier. He's a good guy.
You were on his show.
Say again?
You were on his show or in one of his essays.
I was on his show. He interviewed me. FD's a good guy.
Yeah.
He has a lot of followers.
He does. He does.
Bernie would have saved capital. Wow. Big allegation there.
But that's basically the FDR legacy, right?
Yep. Timothy Cornerson, yeah, Bernie would have been like FDR. So Bernie would have saved capital. Damn. Shots fired.
It needed to be saved.
Please, it needs to be reformed more than saved. You have a lot to learn about materialism, my friends. Stick around. The TRF folks will educate you about how racism and bigotry is downstream from classism. Divide and conquer. All right. J.C. Fry. That was a good FD episode. I had Pascal and Dr. Ball. I saw that episode. I remember that episode.
Yeah, it was a pretty good one. That was a while ago.
That was a while ago. Well, we're coming up on an hour, Dusan.
That's right.
Well, we were able to keep it going. Sadly, we lost our guest, but hopefully we can have him back to talk about this and other subject matters.
Yeah, that would be great. Paul is always a good guest. He is a host, one of our hosts on TIR.
That's true.
Yeah.
Are you on for Thursday?
I believe so. Let me check the calendar really, really quickly. Of course, Restream makes everything super slow on my computer. But Thursday we have Nando Vila.
Correct.
Another Jacobin alum. He is one of the producers on a film about one of the leaders of Ecuador.
Correct.
Yeah, correct. So that should be a good show. Nando's a good guest, and he's a host, so he knows the ropes.
Indeed.
Thank you, Tony, and good to see you, Strom.
Yes. Hey, Strom, how are you? Well, thank you for everyone for watching this episode of This is Revolution. Sorry we lost our guest in between because of technical difficulties, but come back and check us out. I think Jason may have a show tomorrow talking sports. And Thursday we have our show with Nando Vila. That's right. It's safe to say, Tucson, I want to let you say it, we are
out.
you want to take us out of here?
Peace.